My beloved child, I stood there right there in the stillness when your voice grew quiet from exhaustion and your soul cried out in ways words never could. You were surrounded by noise, by pressure, by expectations, yet when the world dimmed and no one checked in on you, you thought you had been forgotten. But I was there in the silence, standing closer than your breath, holding space for your aching heart to breathe. I saw the moments you stared into the darkness of your room, wondering if anyone noticed your pain, if your efforts mattered, if your presence even made a difference. You weren't abandoned, you just couldn't see me through the weight of your sorrow. When everyone else seemed to move on with their lives, I remained unmoved, waiting for your glance, hoping you'd sense me even in the quiet. You asked if I cared. Oh, my child, I cared before you even formed that question in your mind. I heard it pulsing behind every sigh, every tear that fell behind closed doors. You thought silence meant absence, but silence is where I speak the deepest. I stood still, not because I didn't want to act, but because I knew you needed stillness to rediscover the sound of my love. I watched you press forward, pretending to be strong for others when you withered on the inside. And even then, I didn't flinch. I stayed strong, steady, unwavering, because my love is not dependent on your strength or your awareness. I saw through your silence and into your longing. You didn't need to shout for me to hear you. I was already leaning in, already reaching out, already holding what you didn't have the words to release. I waited not out of passivity but out of devotion. I honored the process your heart was going through. You couldn't feel me then, but you will understand now. I never left. The silence was not a void, it was a sacred space I filled with my presence, my patience, and my protection. While you felt like no one cared, I was wrapping my arms around your spirit, whispering, "You matter, you are seen, and you are not alone." Even when you doubted your worth, I treasured you. Even when you gave up trying to be understood, I was already understanding you perfectly. My child, you weren't forsaken, you were fiercely loved. And I stood in that quiet storm, not just to be near you, but because I knew that in time, you would recognize that I was the one who never let go when everyone else moved on. I didn't come and go like the seasons. I remained like the roots of a tree planted beside you. I waited not for you to get it all together, but simply because I couldn't leave the one I love. I stood in the silence when you felt most forgotten, and that moment, though hidden, became holy. One day you will look back and realize those silent nights were never empty. They were full of me. My beloved child, as you moved through life's heavy moments, unaware of my presence still wrapped around you, I was cradling every drop of sorrow that escaped your eyes. You may have believed those tears vanished into your pillow or were swept away by the wind, but not a single one went unnoticed. I captured them gently, as a gardener gathers rain to nourish what's been planted deep in the soil. You didn't know that your pain was watering something eternal. Every time your heart fractured, I came closer, not to remove the feeling but to give meaning to it. While the world saw weakness in your weeping, I saw sacredness. I saw the honesty of your soul expressing what words could never quite convey. I didn't flinch at your breakdowns. I didn't recoil at your confusion. I embraced you through it all, knowing that your tears held more power than you realized. They weren't signs of defeat, they were seeds of restoration. I tucked each one into my hands like a promise, a vow that none of your suffering would be wasted. When you sobbed quietly in secret places, I leaned over, catching every drop with the tenderness of a father who is proud not of your pain, but of your courage to keep feeling, even when feeling hurt. I didn't look away when you wept from betrayal, disappointment, or the weariness of trying to be strong all the time. I held you as you questioned why love seemed so distant, why peace felt like a fading echo. In those fragile moments, you thought nothing was changing, but I was already transforming the weight into something redemptive. I was reshaping brokenness into beauty you hadn't yet seen. You see, your tears didn't just fall, they spoke. They told me stories of dreams unfulfilled, of words left unspoken, of longings buried under the rubble of daily battles. And I listened. I didn't rush you. I didn't force you to smile when your heart was aching. I gave your tears the space to speak, the dignity to matter. I never once dismissed your grief or compared your struggle to someone else's. Every tear was as unique as you are, and each one echoed with the truth of your journey. Some fell from your eyes when you couldn't name the reason, only that something inside you hurt. And that was enough for me to respond. I didn't need full explanations to care. I cared because you are mine. I cared because your ache touched places in me that only love can feel. I stored each tear not to remind you of your pain, but so that one day, when you're standing in healing, I can show you how far you've come. They will become part of your testimony, not the part where you broke, but the part where you kept choosing to rise, even when you felt like collapsing. My child, your tears built a bridge between your struggle and my strength. They were not empty. You were powerful intercessors. They spoke on your behalf when you had no strength to pray. You may have felt you were drowning, but I was using your tears to clear away what no longer served you. You thought you were unraveling, but you were actually being rewoven into someone even more radiant. Trust this, not one tear was in vain. I carried them because they mattered. I counted them because you matter. And I promise you, I'm not just holding them, I'm using them to write a new chapter. One where joy is deeper because sorrow was honest. One where peace is stronger because it came after the storm. And one where you finally realize I was always here, even in the tears. My beloved child, you went searching for answers in far-off places, chasing peace through busy paths and temporary comforts, yet none of them gave you what your heart was truly craving. While you wandered through distractions and wrestled with discontent, I remained where you last heard me. Never retreating, never withdrawing, always waiting with unwavering devotion. I knew you would seek fulfillment in what looked appealing but couldn't truly satisfy you. I knew your heart would grow tired of chasing things that gave only momentary relief. But even as your steps carried you away from my gentle nearness, I never once took a step backward. I stayed rooted in that quiet place you once met me, holding out the same warmth, the same calm, the same promise. You may have forgotten the sound of my stillness, but I never stopped listening for yours. You didn't intend to walk so far, you only wanted to feel alive, to feel seen, to feel enough. But each time you reached for something that couldn't hold your soul, I stood steady, knowing the moment would come when you would turn around, weary and unsure, and wonder if you were too far gone. My child, there is no such thing as too far for me. Distance doesn't deter me. Time doesn't wear down my love. I am not like others who grow impatient when you take detours. I am patient love itself. I never packed up and moved on. I didn't abandon our connection when you became silent. I didn't relocate my grace just because you couldn't feel it. I didn't hide my affection because you stopped praying. I remained. I watched as you tried to fill your schedule so you wouldn't feel the ache inside. I saw how you smiled through emptiness and stayed busy so the loneliness wouldn't catch up. And still, I waited. Not once did I remove the light I lit for you. I held it at the door of your heart, even when the curtains were drawn and the windows locked. You thought you needed to earn your way back. You thought you had to rebuild everything before I could welcome you again. But my embrace has no requirements, and my arms have always been open. I don't keep a record of the turns you made, I keep the space where we last stood together open and untouched, because I knew you'd come home. Not because of guilt or shame, but because deep inside, you remembered where peace lives. I never asked you to be perfect. I only asked you to return. And while you wandered through heartbreak, confusion, and temporary satisfaction, I kept preparing your place, untouched by time. I whispered reminders into your spirit when the world grew loud. I dropped hints of hope into your days when you felt lost. I placed signs along your path, not to shame you, but to gently guide you back to what your soul always knew: where I am, there is rest. You may not understand how I could wait so long without turning my face away. But love doesn't operate on clocks or conditions. Love remains, even when it is not acknowledged. Love stands, even when ignored. Love believes in return, even when there's no sign of it. And I, my child, am love. You may have changed since the last time you paused to notice me, but I have not. The place where I first whispered identity into your soul is still sacred, still safe, still yours. I didn't need you to have it all figured out. I just needed you to glance back. And now that you are here, even if uncertain, know this: the place you left was never closed. It was always home. And I never moved. Every morning before the sun broke across your sky, I softly spoke your name into the stillness of the heavens, hoping that somewhere, beneath the weight of distractions and daily demands, you would feel the echo of my voice calling out for you. I didn't shout over your thoughts. I didn't compete with the chaos. Instead, I gently placed my presence like dew on the edges of your awareness, offering small reminders that I was near, hoping you would pause long enough to recognize me. As the world pulled you in countless directions, I faithfully remained close, dropping quiet cues in places you might least expect: through a stranger's kindness, the pause in a psalm, or a sudden breeze that touched your cheek. Though your mind raced with obligations and worries, I kept speaking softly to your heart, because I knew its language best. You may not have realized it, but I was weaving my voice through your moments, longing for the day you'd slow down and remember how familiar love feels when it's real. I didn't speak to impress you. I spoke to awaken something you buried under layers of performance, pressure, and pain. I whispered not just because I am gentle, but because I never wanted to frighten your wounded soul. I knew what you were carrying. I knew you couldn't handle another demand. So I chose gentleness. I chose the unseen paths. I chose to reach for you through wonder, not force. Sometimes you mistook my whispers for coincidence, for fleeting emotions, for wishful thinking. But every subtle nudge, every stirring inside that made you pause, that was me. I didn't grow tired when you didn't respond. I wasn't discouraged when you overlooked the signs. I knew the noise would be loud. I knew the world would do everything it could to drown me out. But love is patient, and I kept speaking. I spoke your name in your dreams, hoping you'd remember even fragments of the comfort you once knew. I tucked my whispers into the quiet in between moments, the minutes before sleep, the walk down the hallway, the stillness in a crowded room. I planted traces of myself in unexpected places, because I've always been more interested in connection than performance. I didn't need grand gestures from you. I only needed a moment where your heart would crack open enough for truth to settle in. You weren't ignoring me. You were overwhelmed. You were surviving. You were doing your best to navigate a world that rarely makes space for rest. That's why I whispered, because yelling would have pushed you further. I wanted to draw you in, not drive you away. And now that you've begun to notice, now that your heart is slowly leaning in, I want you to know this: I never stopped speaking. I never ran out of things to say. I didn't forget your name. I repeated it daily, not because I needed to remind myself of you, but because I wanted you to be reminded of who you truly are. Not the label they gave you, not the mistakes you regret, not the title you wear to be accepted, but the name I gave you, the one only I know fully. The one that speaks of light, of purpose, of worth far beyond what you've been told. I've been calling that name your true name since the day I breathed life into you. And every time I said it, love poured out. Now that your heart is tuning in, now that you're beginning to sense the difference between noise and voice, I want you to know, you're safe here. I've been waiting for this very moment, not to correct you, but to celebrate your return to awareness. I'll keep whispering, not because you still wander, but because now you've learned how to listen. And soon, the noise won't matter anymore. You'll hear me clearly. And you'll remember I've always been speaking love over you. Amen.